Welcome everyone. I'm so glad you could join us. I want to introduce you to my special guest today, Sr Gemma Kissel. Sr Gemma is a sister of St. Francis of the Martyr of St. George, and she's also almost just about to finish up her master's from Steubenville of Catechetics and Evangelization. Welcome, Sr Gemma.
Thank you so much for taking the time to chat today. It's a real blessing.
Of course. I hope I said everything correctly.
You did great. All of it's a mouthful.
Yes, it is, and I didn't have it written down in front of me, y'all. The struggle's real. I am so honored that we finally get a chance to speak. For all of you that are watching this, Sr Gemma and I, a few years ago, were so blessed to have I guess it was actually just about a year and a half ago, right? A God encounter where we were put on the same panel at a high school event where the high schoolers are able to just ask any questions they want, and they try to put some religious and those of us that have different vocations all together so we can really speak truth to the girls. And it was really fun to be on there with Sr Gemma because they just asked you so many questions about do you sleep in your habit? Like, are you just always wearing it? Like, they'd have these like really like friendship or relationship questions, and they'd be like, but Sr Gemma, like, do you ever pop it off? Like, it was so good. You just handle it with such great grace. I just love that.
Thank you.
So what I would love to talk about today is really starting off by talking about charting our cycles, right? You and I know that there's great benefit to charting cycles, even just by gleaning that beautiful information from it. But I've loved so many conversations that I've had with you about charting cycles, and I think it's something that not a lot of people are either aware of, that there is great benefit to charting your cycles, even if you have the vocation of the religious life, but also, like, you know, if you are just a single woman living in the world, why it's so helpful to learn how to chart your cycle. So I just want to start by throwing the question at you. Why would women chart their cycles if they're not trying to actually use the cycle for a natural family planning method?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's definitely a soapbox of mine. To give a little bit of background, I also am a nurse, so I'm not just personally interested, but also professionally in the whole realm of women's health. And with that, like my own personal journey of seeking wholeness in body, mind, and soul. And so I think to begin, we always have to become aware, right? And so I think that's what charting really allows us to do as women, is to become aware of how we were created with our natural rhythms and with those signs and symptoms that accompany those, and what it looks like when it's working well and it's healthy, and what it looks like when it's not. And really giving ourselves the permission to kind of learn that about ourselves. And it's so freeing, because so many of us walk around with, you know, questions about, well, is this normal? Is that normal? Or we're just told it's normal. And so then when we find out the truth about the natural rhythms of our cycle, I just think that self-knowledge is so freeing, because it's like, oh, that's why that happens, or, oh, that's why I feel like that, or, oh, actually, I shouldn't feel like that. And these are ways that that I can seek healing in that. So I think self-knowledge is just really foundational, because if we don't know ourselves, then we're not able to give ourselves in the most complete way that we were created to give ourselves. Yeah. So that's kind of my first thoughts on it.
Yeah, I love that. So let's dive into that a little bit more. So definitely this awareness, you know, and then driving us down that road of self-knowledge. But what are some other benefits that that you found to charting, you know, whether it's personally or, you know, observationally?
One of the biggest things I think I've noticed, both like living in a community of all women, which poses its own unique joys and challenges, is, you know, our hormones affect our emotions a lot more than I think we always realize. You know, we might think about, oh, like, yeah, I might have PMS emotional changes, but really our hormones affect our emotions all throughout our cycle. And so really understanding why we feel the way we do on a daily basis. And so that's going to change how patient I am. how much energy I have, um, my desire to make a gift of myself, and there's a unique, particularly like a gift of myself physically, right? And so in the religious life, that's something we renounce. And so it's like, oh, actually, the natural rhythms of my body are going to make that easier, that renunciation easier or more difficult at different times. And so that holds true for any woman, whether she is single, preparing to be married, religious, all those things, they're happening within us. And so if we know they're happening, then we can make choices accordingly. Like, I might need extra sleep. I might need extra space. I might need actually to have more experiences of friendship and communion during different times of the month because of like the different fluctuations that accompany that. So it really helps us know what we need and know how to really care for ourselves in a way that supports every aspect of our lives.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think too, when we acknowledge that our energy output is going to be higher at certain times of the month, or the way that our
Mm-hmm.
brain is actually functioning at different
Mm-hmm.
times of the month is going to vary. And it allows for a deeper sense of grace with ourselves, right? Like what I'm going
Mm-hmm.
to ask of my body during menstruation is different than what I'm going to ask of my body during ovulation, when I tend to have a
Mm-hmm.
lot of energy and pep and a lot of go, 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 go. Like I can,
Mm-hmm.
and that's true whether it's like actually like physically demanding, right? Like if I was lifting weights or whatever it is, like I would not ask my body to do that during menstruation in the way
Mm-hmm.
that I would around ovulation. But also, and I'm sure you feel this acutely, sister, wrapping up your master's degree, just at different times when we know our period's coming and we're going to be more tired, we're probably not going to plan a 5 a.m. personal study session, right? Like we would like a couple weeks later during ovulation. And we're like, yep, I can do this 7 hours. I'm good to go. I could keep running. And it's so important to do that. I think the first time that I started to listen to my body on that way, I realized how much we're impacted by, a man's body can do that, right? Like this
Mm-hmm.
next to the next, he can wake up at the same time, go to bed at the same time. He feels the same. His hormones shift, right? But it's just during the day. It's not from week to week, and it's not nearly as drastic over the course of the month.
Mm-hmm.
And so there is this discrepancy, right? We have the very much a world that's been dominated by how the man's body works, and so it's important to see that we need to give ourselves more grace, that it is different for us as
Mm-hmm.
women, and to reconcile with that, and not be hard on ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't get to the gym 4 times this week. Well, you're during your period, so take a break, do some stretching, right? Like just do it different.
Mm-hmm.
I love that. So good. So much that awareness piece.
Mm-hmm.
So in that same vein, then, in this very lost and broken world, right, we see women at war with their bodies all the time. Do you think that charting our cycles can help us to be reconciled with our bodies?
Absolutely. I think it kind of moves from that progression of like self-knowledge to then really self-possession, right? That self-acceptance, if you will, of learning why our body does things it does, and really trying to think of the right way to convey it. It's really that deep understanding of ourselves that can move toward that acceptance, right? I think a lot of us grow up with body image issues, or we are maybe overly physically active or under eating, or all those things that really don't nourish our feminine bodies. And so I think I've seen such a growth in really celebrating the gifts of femininity, and that we were created to be able to conceive and bear and nourish life. And because of that, like, our body has unique needs. But I think that's like a personal journey towards acceptance for each woman, right? And how, like, I think when we operate from that standpoint of, like, oh, but guys can do it, why can't I think that's so harmful, but so subtle, like in our thought process of I should be able to eat a certain way, live a certain way, exercise a certain way. But I think those messages that we absorb either consciously or unconsciously can really undermine, like you said, like we can really feel at war with our bodies of like, we're really out of control. And that's, I think, something that there's many layers of healing that play into that. But I think absolutely becoming more aware of the gift of our bodies and what our body is capable of doing. And even maybe just practicing gratitude for that. Like, and realizing like, wow, like even just like either thanking the Lord or thanking even just your body, like, thank you so much that you are able to bring forth new life, even if that's not like, that will never be a physical possibility in my life, but even just thinking and marveling at the beautiful thing that is, that my body is capable of, and kind of sitting in that space, and maybe that means taking it to prayer with like Psalm 139 of like, I praise you, God, for I'm fearfully and wonderfully made, both in those things that I like about my body and those things that I don't. And so really like stepping into our own body and realizing that deep unity that we have with our body, that it's not something other than us, but it is an integral part of us. But yeah, like I said, that's a unique journey that has many layers.
Yeah,
but charting's a good place to start.
yeah, definitely. And I do think that there's something so beautiful about, regardless of when we get this information, right? Regardless of when it is we start charting our cycles or start to learn that there are things to chart or whatever it is, like wherever you are in that journey. I think that I think back to, I think this is a good example to use. When I was a little girl, the first time I ever heard that I was going to have a period was in fourth or fifth grade sex ed class, right? Like they separate the girls and the boys. You find out you're going to have a period. Here's what you'll use. Good luck. Like that was it,
Yeah.
right? And then I grew up in a home where you kind of didn't talk about that stuff. I would write notes to my mom. This is what I need. And that was just the way she knew, right? And then when I was pregnant with our fifth, my second is a girl, and she was 11. And I remember her, we were cuddling in bed. I was very pregnant, like a week before my due date. And she asked me a question about how my body could hold a baby. Right. And so I just saw that as this beautiful opportunity to give her the same talk I was given in my fourth, fifth grade class. But instead of, you'll have a period, it's going to happen every month for the rest of your life, here's the stuff you'll use, it was instead, talking about the great gift that we have as women, the way that we're anatomically different. And I can't remember where I heard this from. I cannot credit myself to this, but I heard someone say one time, it might have been Cameron Fradd. She said that she would talk to her girls and say, like, your belly is more like not more special, but like, along those lines than your brothers. And do you know why? It's because you can hold a whole person in there, right? And I think part of it is that, like, starting to lay that foundation. But then as we start to learn more about the ways that our body's so unique and beautifully made, we see that grand design down to such a deep, intricate level that we can't deny that it's all for a purpose, right? We know it's for a purpose, but we also see how we've so often said, like, I have ovaries and I have this, right? But it's also interrelated that we can't reduce it to any part of our body. We can't reduce it to the sum of our parts. And so I think there is this integration for sure with that mind, body, spirit, right? But also then this, like, as we learn more that we weren't just like a little ball of clay that God gave action to, and now we're like good to go. Like it's so much deeper than that, right? To the point where they're still unraveling the mystery of the female body, like to this day, right? And that's so incredible and empowering, and something that I think it stops us in our tracks, right? When we do come from that place of like an eating disorder or whatever it has been in your past or is there now, it causes us to say, whoa, what am I doing here? This is a gift. This is a gift of the Holy Spirit. And you can see that down to our very DNA. So, that being said, what do you think are some other ways that we can pursue this path to healing and wholeness? Or maybe it's not other ways, maybe it's additional.
I think additional, because I think the more that I've gotten to understand like both myself and the human person just in my conversations, I think the more we try to like separate it out, the more artificial it is. And I think we're so interconnected, like body, mind, and soul. And so addressing one area is going to impact all the areas, you know? So I think we've already talked about the importance, you know, at least some aspects of the importance of knowing your cycle. And I know you have some great videos on your channel about, ways to pursue like more holistic healing when you have maybe some issues with your reproductive health. But I think it's also like taking time to really sit with the beliefs that we have about ourselves, especially those places where we might have internalized some lies, and that negative self-talk, because that really impacts us both body and soul, because what we tell ourselves affects us physically, right? Like, and so I think it's an invitation not to just knowing how our body works, but also how our heart works, and seeking healing in that way. But also finding practitioners that are going to treat us as whole persons, because that's been a huge part of my own journey of trying to find practitioners that are going to treat me that way, and that see me not just as, oh, this problem or this piece or this part that isn't functioning as it should, but saying, okay, well, like your cycle's off. Well, like, let's talk about your stress levels. Let's talk about your activity levels. Let's talk about your diet. And so all those are areas where we can seek healing. But I think there's a danger there too of it becoming an idol of like trying to do everything perfectly, and realizing that our journey towards healing is just that, like, it's a journey. And so I think that's something I've had to discern myself, and pursuing my own physical and emotional health, of, you know, what is just pursuit of an ideal that has become an idol, and where is the Lord inviting me to deeper wholeness, and really discerning that. Yeah, so those are my initial thoughts.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's so good. Yeah, I see that all the time too, right? Like we just have these we're the meanest person in our whole world, right? And the ways that we also, like, whether that started from a spiritual wound, which I think very often they do, but we just assume that it's not going to show up later, right? Or rear its ugly head in this totally unrelated thing like my physical health, right? But in actuality, we can really unlock our actual healing progress in that journey by cooperating, right? So like whether that's pursuing that spiritual healing while simultaneously looking at how you're treating your body and what are those dominant thoughts, right? We need to like find that truth in that spiritual healing to be able to, how do we renounce a lie? We have to actually renounce, right? We have to announce the truth over that lie. And so whether it's I can't, replacing that with an I can, you know, or whatever it is you find through prayer, like really discerning what is that dominant negative thought I'm telling myself all the time. It's such critical, hard, uncomfortable work, but it bears such beautiful, amazing fruit.
So it sure does.
Yes. Oh my goodness. So the other thing that I find is really interesting is that, you know, we in the church, we've always talked about charting cycles, and using that as an alternative to birth control. And I think in more recent years, we've had that really catch fire, also in like the green crunchy space kind of movement too, right? Where we also don't want to be putting chemicals into our body. But what I think is really interesting about that, and I'm curious your thoughts on this, is how then we're seeing whether it's women start on this path to chart their cycles, and then they end up, you know, diving into more holistic health, functional medicine, and that's where they're getting treated for it outside of people that are whether they're Catholic or Christian. And then there's so much that's steeped in like New Ageism. Like, for example, I was looking for a clinic to help one of my kiddos with something, and every single clinic I was finding that did the specific course of treatment I wanted practiced Reiki in the office, every single one.
Mm.
And I was like, I'm in the Cincinnati area. It's really a pretty Catholic area. Why can't I find this? Right? It's so steeped in when we start to learn more about our bodies, and then we also discover there's all this New Ageism wrapped up in it. Why do you think that is? It's a big, heavy question.
It sure is. I think it goes back to the beginning, right? Of that, like the human person is made in the image and likeness of God. And so who we are as human persons, especially in our wholeness and our like wholeness being like both holiness and like physical wholeness and health is a threat to the evil one. And so I think anytime you kind of see those things crop up that are really against the Lord and not of him, I think that can sometimes be a signal of where like the most powerful things are. You know, you think about the garden and the Garden of Eden and the original fall there, that like Eve was the one who was attacked, and just like women as the crown of creation and that beauty there. And so I think anytime there's a good, I think the evil one's pretty quick to get in there and just twist it just a little bit, because the Lord wants our healing and the Lord wants our wholeness. But like I was saying earlier, like it can become an idol, or we can pursue it in ways that are contrary to the way we've been created. And so I think that's just part of the evil one's very sneaky and sometimes very subtle attack on the gift of the human person and the goodness that we are. So I think it both affirms the goodness of the human person, but it also is a cause for discernment, like you were saying, and what we're opening ourselves up to.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I love that. And something I felt very acutely too, like this is just so obvious, right? It's the potential is so beautiful for us to really be reconciled and continue down that path to holiness. That, yeah, it's so good. I love that. So that all being said, what final words would you have that you'd like to leave with any of our listeners, or maybe it's somebody that isn't currently charting their cycles and they've heard about it but haven't done it? What would you say to somebody in that camp?
I would say it's never too late. And it's so important. And really, what have we got to lose? I think we can come up with all sorts of reasons that keep us from starting, but maybe it's just taking the next right step of watching, a video on YouTube or reading a book and learning more. So I think I would just encourage anyone who's kind of on the fence to just go for it. And, we spend lots of time we waste lots of time doing other things. Why not waste it on something on something that could leave us healthier, happier, holier, and more free?
For sure.
It's worth it.
So good. Oh, thank you so much for your time today, Sister Gemma. This was so great. I really appreciate you.
Absolutely. You are a gift.